Let's begin. Darren Walsh learned about patience in the oil fields of West Texas, where he spent 12 years as a drilling supervisor before a back injury forced him into an office job as a logistics coordinator. He was 42, broad-shouldered, with permanent sun lines around his eyes and calloused hands that hadn't softened despite 3 years away from fieldwork. He'd married Claudia Bowers 7 years ago, a whirlwind romance that began at a charity fundraiser in Houston. She was beautiful, articulate, from a wealthy Dallas family. Her sister Nikki still lived in the Walsh home, a temporary arrangement that had stretched into 2 years. Darren had 2 children. Sophia, his 9-year-old daughter from his first marriage to a woman who died in a car accident when Sophia was 2, had her mother's dark curls and quiet intelligence. Tommy, his 6-year-old son with Claudia, was the light of his life, always laughing, always asking questions, always wanting to help his father fix things in the garage. The Walsh house sat in a quiet suburb north of Houston, a 2-story colonial with a basement Darren had refinished himself. Claudia worked part-time at an art gallery, though she didn't need to work, her family money ensured that. Nikki, 28 and perpetually between jobs, claimed to be working on a photography business that never seemed to materialize beyond expensive equipment purchases. Darren had noticed things over the past year. Small things. Tommy would flinch when Nikki raised her voice. Sophia had become even quieter than usual, spending more time in her room. When he asked Claudia about it, she'd wave him off. Kids go through phases, she'd say. Don't baby them. But Darren wasn't raised to ignore his instincts. His father, a retired sheriff in Midland, had taught him to watch, listen, and trust his gut. Something felt wrong in his own home. But every time he tried to address it, Claudia would deflect, and Nikki would disappear into her room. 2 weeks before Father's Day, Darren came home early from work to find Tommy sitting on the basement stairs, his face streaked with tears. The door was locked from the outside. "How long have you been here, buddy?" Darren asked, unlocking it immediately. "I don't know, Daddy. Aunt Nikki said I was being bad." "What did you do?" Tommy's lip trembled. "I spilled juice on her camera bag." Darren felt heat rise in his chest. He found Nikki in the living room, scrolling through her phone. "Did you lock my son in the basement?" She barely looked up. He needed a timeout. "He's destructive. He's 6 years old. You don't lock a child in a dark basement." "Maybe, if you disciplined him properly, I wouldn't have to." Darren's jaw clenched. "You're not his parent. Don't ever do that again." When Claudia came home, she took her sister's side. "You're overreacting, Darren. It was just a timeout. My parents did the same thing to us. That doesn't make it right." "Oh, please. You're so dramatic. This is why Tommy's becoming soft, you coddle him." That night, Darren lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Sophia had come to his room after everyone went to bed, something she rarely did. "Daddy," she whispered. "Are you awake?" "Yeah, sweetheart. What's wrong? Can Tommy and I stay with Grandpa for a while?" His heart sank. "Why would you want that?" She was quiet for a long moment. "Things are different when you're not home." "Different how?" But she just shook her head and left, leaving Darren with a knot of dread in his stomach. Father's Day arrived on a Sunday that felt like any other. Darren woke to find Sophia had made him a card decorated with crayon drawings of oil rigs and hearts. Tommy burst into the bedroom at 7 a.m. with a package wrapped in newspaper, a coffee mug he'd painted at school that read, "World's Best Dad," in uneven letters. "I love it, buddy," Darren said, pulling his son into a hug. Tommy smelled like syrup and sleep. Claudia was already up, dressed in tennis whites, her blonde hair pulled into a sleek ponytail. "I'm meeting the girls for brunch at the club," she announced. "We'll do your Father's Day dinner tonight." "It's Father's Day," Darren said carefully. "I thought we'd spend it together. I made a reservation for 6 p.m. at Morton's." "That's together." She kissed his cheek, her perfume sharp and expensive. "Don't wait up if we go shopping after." After she left, Nikki emerged from her room, irritated. "Can you keep Tommy quiet? Some of us are trying to sleep." "It's 7:30 in the morning on Father's Day," Darren said. "My son can make noise in his own house." She rolled her eyes. "Whatever. Just control him." Darren took the kids to IHOP for breakfast, then to the park. Tommy played on the swings while Sophia sat beside Darren on a bench, reading a library book about wolves. "You happy, sweetheart?" he asked. She nodded but didn't look up. "Daddy, When I'm older, can I live with Grandpa and Grandma? You don't like living with me. I like living with you. Just not the house. He wanted to press her, but Tommy ran over, breathless and excited. Daddy, watch me go down the big slide. They stayed at the park until noon, then stopped for ice cream. By the time they got home at 1 p.m., the house was quiet. Nikki's car was in the driveway, but Claudia's was gone. Go wash up for lunch, Darren told the kids. He headed to the kitchen to make sandwiches, noticing dirty dishes piled in the sink. Nikki's breakfast mess, as usual. 15 minutes later, he heard Sophia scream. He ran upstairs to find her standing outside Tommy's room, trembling. He's not in his room, Daddy. I can't find him. They searched the house. Tommy's shoes were by the front door. His bike was in the garage. Darren's pulse quickened. Tommy, where are you, buddy? Sophia grabbed his arm. The basement door is closed. Darren's blood turned cold. He ran to the basement door and found it locked from the outside, the same simple latch lock he'd been meaning to remove. He could hear scratching from the other side. Tommy. He yanked the door open and flew down the stairs. His son lay at the bottom of the stairs, crumpled against the concrete wall. His lips were blue. He wasn't moving. Tommy! Darren scooped him up. The boy's skin was cold, his small body limp. No, no, no! Tommy, wake up! Wake up! Sophia appeared at the top of the stairs, her face white. Daddy? Call 911. Now! Darren laid Tommy on the floor, checking for a pulse. They're faint, barely there. He started CPR, his hands shaking, counting compressions the way he'd learned in the oilfield safety courses. Come on, son. Come on. He heard Sophia on the phone upstairs, her voice high and frightened. Footsteps thundered above. Nikki, finally awake. What's going on? She called down. You locked him in the basement again, Darren shouted, not stopping compressions. How long has he been down here? I didn't. How long? Nikki. I don't know. A few hours. He was being a brat, throwing a tantrum because I wouldn't let him play video games. He needed to calm down. A few hours. Darren's vision blurred with rage and terror. Tommy's chest wasn't rising. His lips were getting bluer. You left a 6-year-old in a locked basement for hours? The paramedics arrived within 8 minutes. Darren moved aside as they took over, their efficient hands working on his son's small body. One of them, a woman named Chin according to her badge, looked up at him with professional sympathy. How long has he been unconscious? I don't know. I found him like this maybe 10 minutes ago. He was locked in the basement. How long was he in the basement? Darren's hands clenched into fists. Hours. 3, maybe 4. Chin's partner, a broad-shouldered man named Rodriguez, was checking Tommy's vitals, shining a light in his eyes. Pupils are responsive but sluggish. Pulse is weak. We need a transport now. They loaded Tommy onto a gurney. As they wheeled him toward the ambulance, Claudia's Mercedes pulled into the driveway. She stepped out, still in her tennis outfit, her face flushed from mimosas and gossip. What's happening? Is that an ambulance? It's Tommy, Darren said, his voice flat. Your sister locked him in the basement for 3 hours. He's barely breathing. Claudia's eyes widened, but instead of horror, something else flickered across her face. Annoyance. Oh, for God's sake. He's fine. He's probably just faking it to get attention. You know how dramatic he is. Darren stared at his wife, as if seeing a stranger. Faking it? He's unconscious. Claudia. Nikki knows what she's doing. She used to babysit all the time. Tommy just doesn't like discipline. Get in the car, Darren said coldly. We're going to the hospital. I'm not going anywhere. I'm sure he'll be fine once he gets some attention from the paramedics. Chin looked at Claudia with barely disguised disgust. Ma'am, your son is in critical condition. I strongly suggest you accompany him to the hospital. Claudia waved her hand dismissively. I'll drive over later. Someone needs to stay with Sophia. Darren turned to his daughter, who stood in the doorway, looking small and terrified. She walked over to him and tugged his sleeve, pulling him down so she could whisper in his ear. Daddy, check his tummy. He frowned. What? His tummy. Check inside. Please. There was something in her eyes, knowing, frightened. He turned to Chen. Can you check his stomach? My daughter says she thinks there might be something wrong there. Chen nodded to Rodriguez, who gently pressed on Tommy's abdomen. The boy didn't react. Rodriguez's expression changed. Abdomen is distended and rigid. Could be internal bleeding. Or, he paused. Then looked at Chin. We need to get him to Memorial now. I'm riding with you, Darren said. At the hospital, they rushed Tommy into the ER. Darren paced the waiting room, his hands still shaking. Sophia sat beside him, clutching his arm. He'd brought her with him. No way was he leaving her alone with Claudia and Nikki. 40 minutes later, a doctor emerged, her face grave. Dr. Elizabeth Manning was in her 50s, with short gray hair and sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Mr. Walsh? I'm Dr. Manning. We've stabilized your son for now. But we need to talk. Is he going to be okay? We ran some scans and did a gastric lavage, pumped his stomach. Mr. Walsh, did your son have access to any cleaning chemicals or medications? Darren's mouth went dry. What? No. Why? We found significant amounts of antifreeze in his system. Ethylene glycol poisoning. Based on the quantity and his symptoms, he likely ingested it several hours ago. The floor seemed to tilt. Antifreeze. How would he? His mind raced. They kept antifreeze in the garage, on a high shelf. Tommy couldn't reach it. Are you saying someone gave it to him? Doctor. Manning's expression was carefully neutral. I'm saying he has a potentially lethal amount of antifreeze in his system. We're treating him with foam pitsol and dialysis. But the next few hours are critical. The police have been notified, as required by law, in cases of suspected poisoning in minors. The police? Darren felt like he was underwater. Someone poisoned my son? That's what we need to determine. A detective will want to speak with you. Sophia squeezed his hand. When he looked down at her, tears were streaming down her face. I tried to stop her. Daddy. I tried. His heart stopped. Stop who, sweetheart? What did you see? Aunt Nikki. This morning, after you left for breakfast, she came into Tommy's room and gave him juice. She told him it was special Father's Day juice, that you wanted him to drink it before he saw you. He didn't want to, but she made him. She held his nose and poured it down his throat. The world narrowed to a pinpoint. She forced him to drink it? Sophia nodded, sobbing now. I was in the hallway. I saw through the crack in the door. Tommy was crying and trying to spit it out, but she kept pouring. Then, she saw me watching. She told me if I said anything, she'd hurt you. She said she'd tell everyone you hurt us, and they'd take you away forever. Darren pulled his daughter close, his mind spinning. Nikki had poisoned Tommy. Intentionally. She'd forced antifreeze down his throat, then locked him in the basement to hide the evidence, to let the poison do its work. And Claudia had laughed it off, had refused to come to the hospital, had called their dying son dramatic. A detective arrived 20 minutes later. Gerald Chen, no relation to the paramedic, was a weathered man in his 50s with the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too much. Mr. Walsh, I need to ask you some questions about what happened today. Darren told him everything, his voice mechanical. The basement, Nikki's pattern of locking Tommy in there, Sophia's witness statement. Chen wrote it all down, his expression darkening. Where is Nikki Bauer now? At my house, I assume. With my wife. I'm going to need to bring her in for questioning. We're treating this as an attempted homicide. The words hit like a physical blow. Attempted homicide. Someone had tried to murder his son. Detective, Darren said quietly. My daughter said Nikki threatened her. Told her she'd frame me if Sophia said anything. Chen nodded grimly. We'll need to interview your daughter formally, with a child advocate present. And Mr. Walsh, I have to ask. Where were you this morning between 8 a.m. and noon? I hop on Westheimer from 8 to 9. Park on Memorial Drive from 9:30 to 11:30. Stopped at Amy's Ice Cream on Shepherd until noon. My kids were with me the entire time. Good. That gives you an alibi. I'll need the receipts if you have them. Darren pulled them from his wallet with shaking hands. Chen examined them, nodded, and handed them back. One more thing, Chen said. Has there been any history of animosity between your sister-in-law and your son? She didn't like him. Thought he was too loud, too energetic. She'd punish him for normal kid behavior. Darren's voice cracked. I should have done more. I should have kicked her out. You couldn't have known she'd do this. But Darren knew better. He'd seen the signs, the locked basement, Sophia's fear, Tommy's flinching. He'd known something was wrong, and he'd let Claudia talk him out of trusting his instincts. Not anymore. Tommy survived the first night, but barely. Dr. Manning explained that antifreeze poisoning was insidious. It caused kidney failure, brain damage, metabolic acidosis. Even with treatment, the outcomes were uncertain. The next 48 hours will tell us more, she said. He's young, which works in his favor. But the amount he ingested was significant. We're doing everything we can. Darren didn't leave the hospital. He sat by Tommy's bed, watching the machines breathe for his son, watching the fluids drip into his small arm. Sophia stayed with him, curled in a chair, sleeping fitfully. Claudia showed up on Monday afternoon, dressed in black like she was attending a funeral. She looked annoyed to find Darren still there. "You haven't been home in 2 days," she said. "This is excessive. Our son is dying." "He's not dying. The doctors said he'll recover. They said he might recover. And he's only in this bed because your sister poisoned him." Claudia's jaw tightened. "That's a horrible accusation. Nikki would never." Sophia saw her do it. Forced antifreeze down his throat. "The police have her in custody." For the first time, Claudia looked uncertain. Sophia's just a child. She probably misunderstood what she saw. She described it in detail. Nikki held Tommy's nose and poured it down his throat, then threatened Sophia to keep quiet. "That's ridiculous. Why would Nikki do that?" Darren stood, his exhaustion giving way to a cold, focused rage. "You tell me, Claudia. You're her sister. You defended her when she locked him in the basement. You laughed when I said he was dying. So you tell me, why would she try to kill our son?" Claudia's face flushed. "I don't have to listen to this. You're being emotional and irrational. Get out." "Excuse me? Get out of this room. Get away from my son. And when he wakes up, if he wakes up, you won't be welcome near him." Claudia's eyes narrowed. "He's my son too. Then where were you yesterday? Where were you when he needed his mother?" She didn't answer. She turned and walked out, her heels clicking on the linoleum floor. Detective Chin came by that evening, with updates. Nikki had been charged with attempted murder and child abuse. She lawyered up immediately, wasn't talking. But the evidence was substantial. Sophia's testimony, the antifreeze found in Tommy's system, and something else. "We searched your house with a warrant," Chin said. "Found a bottle of antifreeze in Nikki Bauer's bathroom, hidden behind cleaning supplies. It was half empty. We also found internet search history on her laptop from 3 weeks ago. Searches about ethylene glycol poisoning, lethal doses, symptoms." Darren felt sick. 3 weeks ago? She'd been planning this? Appears that way. "We also found text messages between her and your wife." Claudia knew. Chin hesitated. "The messages are suggestive. Nikki complained about Tommy frequently. Your wife responded with things like, 'I know, he's exhausting, and sometimes I wish he'd just disappear.' On Friday, 2 days before the incident, Nikki texted, 'I have an idea to solve our Tommy problem.' Your wife responded, 'Whatever you do, keep me out of it.' The room spun. Claudia had known. Maybe not the specifics, but she'd known Nikki was planning something. Can you charge her? We're building a case. The messages don't prove she knew about the poisoning specifically, but they show a pattern. We're looking into financial records, life insurance policies, anything that might establish motive. There's a policy, Darren said slowly. On both kids, $500,000 each. Claudia insisted on it 3 years ago, said it was responsible parenting. Chin's expression hardened. Who's the beneficiary? She is. I'm the secondary. We'll subpoena the paperwork. Mr. Walsh, I want you to be careful. If your wife was involved in this, she won't try anything. Not with police watching. Maybe not directly. But people who are capable of hurting a child are capable of anything. After Chin left, Darren sat in the dark, listening to Tommy's ventilator hiss and sigh. Sophia was asleep again, exhausted from giving her formal statement to the police. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Meet me at the Starbucks on Kirby at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Come alone. Jeffrey Galloway." Jeffrey Galloway. Claudia's lawyer. This wasn't good. Darren met Galloway at the Starbucks, leaving Sophia with a nurse he trusted. Galloway was exactly what Darren expected. Slick, expensive suit, perfect hair, the kind of lawyer who defended white-collar criminals and wealthy wives in divorces. "Mr. Walsh, thank you for meeting me. What do you want?" Galloway stirred his coffee delicately. "My client, Claudia Walsh, has asked me to extend an olive branch. She understands you're upset about the situation with your son. Situation? Darren's voice was dangerously quiet. My son is on life support because someone poisoned him. Allegedly poisoned. By Nikki Bauer, who my client had no knowledge of any criminal intent. Claudia is a victim here too. Is that what she's claiming? It's the truth. Claudia had no idea her sister was unstable. She's devastated. She told her sister, whatever you do, keep me out of it. The police have the texts. Galloway didn't even blink. A vague statement that could mean anything. Nikki frequently complained about household issues. Claudia assumed she meant she'd have a stern talk with Tommy about behavior. You're lying. I'm representing my client's interests. Now, here's what we're proposing. Claudia is willing to agree to a divorce on favorable terms. You get full custody of both children, the house, and she'll waive spousal support. In exchange, you sign an NDA agreeing not to make public statements linking Claudia to Nikki's actions. Darren stared at him. You want me to let her walk away? She is walking away. She had nothing to do with what Nikki did. The NDA protects her reputation, that's all. She's already been through hell, her sister arrested, her son in the hospital, her marriage falling apart. My son might die. Which is why you should take this deal. It gives you everything you want: your children, your home, freedom from a marriage that's clearly over. All you have to do is not publicly accuse Claudia of something you can't prove. Darren's hands clenched under the table. And if I don't sign? Galloway's smile was sharp. Then things get complicated. Claudia will fight for custody. She'll argue that you were negligent, left the children unsupervised, allowed dangerous substances to be accessible to a child. She'll paint you as an absent father whose work schedule left the kids vulnerable. That's insane. Is it? You worked long hours in the oil fields. You were gone for days at a time. Who was watching the children then? I had nannies. And my first wife is dead. Convenient, isn't it? Some might wonder about that too. Darren stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. My first wife died in a car accident. You're disgusting. I'm thorough, and I'm very good at my job. Sign the NDA, take the clean divorce, and move on with your life. Or fight this and lose everything in a protracted court battle that will drain your finances and destroy your children's sense of stability. Your choice. Darren walked out without another word. In his truck. He sat gripping the steering wheel, breathing hard. They were trying to corner him, make him take the easy way out while Claudia escaped responsibility. His phone rang. Detective Chen. Mr. Walsh, we got the life insurance paperwork. Claudia took out those policies 3 years ago, right after she and Nikki had a major financial setback. Nikki's photography business went bankrupt, left them both in debt. The Bauer family cut Nikki off financially, said she needed to stand on her own feet. So they needed money. The policies have a double indemnity clause for accidental death. If Tommy died from poisoning that appeared accidental, Claudia would collect $1 million. Darren's blood ran cold. They were going to kill him for money. It's looking that way. We're also investigating Nikki's phone records. She made several calls to a number registered to Lori Jordan, a former cellmate from when Nikki did 6 months for check fraud 4 years ago. Jordan has a history of making threats and witness intimidation. They're planning something. We're putting protection on you and Sophia. And Mr. Walsh, be very careful. People who are cornered get desperate. That night, Tommy's condition worsened. His kidneys were failing despite dialysis. Dr. Manning called Darren into her office, her face drawn. We need to discuss next steps. If Tommy's kidneys don't respond to treatment in the next 24 hours, we'll need to consider long-term dialysis or transplant. At his age, with the brain damage from the poisoning. What brain damage? Her expression softened with sympathy. The scans show oxygen deprivation to parts of his brain. We won't know the full extent until he wakes up. If he wakes up, but there will likely be cognitive and motor skill impacts. Darren felt like he'd been gutted. Even if Tommy survived, he might never be the same bright, energetic boy who'd made him that coffee mug. He returned to Tommy's room to find Claudia there, standing over their son's bed. She turned when she heard him. You met with Jeffrey, she said. Your attack dog? Yeah. He's trying to help both of us, Darren. This doesn't have to be a war. Your sister poisoned our son. You knew she was planning something. I didn't know anything. Her voice was ice. Nikki is mentally ill. I had no idea how far gone she was. The texts say otherwise. The texts show a frustrated woman venting about a difficult child. That's all. Darren moved closer, his voice low and hard. I'm going to destroy you, Claudia. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you did. I'm going to take everything from you, the way you took Tommy from me. She smiled, and it was the coldest thing he'd ever seen. You can try, but I have better lawyers, more money, and more friends in this city than you'll ever have. You're a roughneck from Midland who got lucky. I'm a Bauer. We don't lose. We'll see. After she left, Darren sat by Tommy's bed, holding his son's small, cold hand. Sophia climbed into his lap, and they sat together in the semi-darkness, listening to the machines keep Tommy alive. Daddy, Sophia whispered. Are you going to make them pay? He looked at his daughter, 9 years old, forced to witness her brother being poisoned, threatened into silence. She deserved better. They both did. Yes, sweetheart. I'm going to make them pay for everything. He just had to figure out how. Tommy didn't wake up. 5 days after Father's Day, his small body gave up fighting. The kidney failure cascaded into multi-organ failure. Dr. Manning did everything possible, but some poisons were too efficient, too cruel. Darren was holding his hand when the monitors went flat. Sophia was asleep in the chair, mercifully spared from watching her brother die. The nurses came in quietly, turned off the machines, removed the tubes. They left him alone to say goodbye. He sat there for an hour, memorizing Tommy's face, trying to reconcile the stillness with the boy who'd been so alive just days before. 6 years old. Gone because his aunt wanted insurance money and his mother didn't care enough to stop it. The funeral was small. Darren's parents drove from Midland. His father, Lawrence Walsh, a retired sheriff with hard eyes and a harder handshake. His mother, Esther, who held Sophia and cried silently. A few friends from work came. Claudia's family sent flowers but didn't attend. Claudia herself sat in the front row of the church, dressed in Prada black, her face carefully composed in what was supposed to pass for grief. Nikki was still in jail, denied bail. She'd be tried for murder now, not attempted murder. Her lawyer was already spinning a story about mental illness and diminished capacity. After the service, Lawrence pulled Darren aside. Son, you need to tell me the truth. All of it. They sat in Lawrence's truck, and Darren laid it out everything. The basement lockings, Sophia's statement, the texts, the insurance money. Lawrence listened without interruption, his jaw getting tighter with each revelation. The police are building a case against both of them, Darren finished. But Claudia's lawyers are good. Jeffrey Galloway is already creating doubt, saying she had no knowledge of Nikki's plans. What does your gut tell you? That Claudia knew exactly what would happen. Maybe not the specifics, but she knew Nikki would hurt Tommy. She might have even encouraged it. Lawrence was quiet for a long moment. Your mother wants you and Sophia to come stay with us for a while. I can't leave Houston. The trial won't start for months, maybe a year. And in the meantime, what? You stay in that house where your son was murdered? You let Sophia sleep under the same roof where her brother was poisoned? Darren hadn't thought about it. He'd been operating on autopilot since Tommy died, but Lawrence was right. Sophia couldn't go back to that house. We'll sell it, Darren said. Get an apartment closer to my parents' place in Midland. Start over. Good. And Darren, I know some people. People who can dig deeper than the police, find things lawyers can hide. If Claudia was involved, we'll prove it. 2 weeks later, Darren had moved into a small apartment in Midland. Sophia was enrolled in a new school, seeing a therapist twice a week to process the trauma. She was quieter than ever, barely speaking, but she seemed relieved to be away from Houston. Lawrence's people turned out to be an investigator named Franklin McGuire, a former FBI agent who'd retired to private work. Franklin was methodical and relentless. Within a month, he'd found things the police had missed. Your wife and her sister weren't just in debt, Franklin explained, spreading documents across Darren's kitchen table. They were desperate. 3 years ago, Nikki borrowed $200,000 from a loan shark named Stephen Pope to invest in her photography business. When it failed, Pope wanted his money back with interest. He's not the kind of guy you stiff. How much did she owe? By the time Tommy died, $350,000. And Pope was getting impatient. He'd threatened both sisters, told them he'd hurt their family if they didn't pay. Darren's mind raced. So killing Tommy wasn't just about the insurance money. It was survival. Exactly. And here's the kicker: Claudia co-signed on that loan. She's equally liable. They were both drowning, and they saw Tommy's life insurance as a way out. Can we prove Claudia knew about the poisoning plan? Franklin pulled out another document. Phone records show Claudia and Nikki had a 40-minute call 2 nights before Father's Day. Then Nikki searched antifreeze poisoning children and how long does ethylene glycol take to kill. The next morning, Claudia transferred $5,000 to Nikki's account with a memo for supplies. That's consciousness of guilt. It's suggestive, but Galloway will argue it was for photography equipment or household expenses. We need more. We need to prove Claudia knew the specific plan. Over the next 3 months, Franklin dug deeper. He found that Claudia had been having an affair with a man named Shane Buchanan, a real estate developer with more money than scruples. She'd told friends she wanted to leave Darren, but needed the insurance money first to start fresh. Franklin also discovered that Nikki had purchased the antifreeze from a hardware store using Claudia's credit card. The receipt was dated June 10th, 5 days before Tommy's death. She used Claudia's card, Franklin said, which means either Claudia gave it to her or Nikki took it without permission. But given everything else, Claudia gave it to her. She knew what it was for. The trial for Nikki Bauer began in October. The prosecution laid out a damning case: premeditation, search history, Sophia's eyewitness testimony. Nikki's lawyer tried the mental illness defense, bringing in psychiatrists who claimed she had borderline personality disorder and couldn't fully comprehend her actions. Darren sat through every day of testimony, watching the woman who'd killed his son try to avoid responsibility. When Sophia took the stand, she was calm and clear, describing what she'd seen in heartbreaking detail. She held his nose shut, Sophia said, her voice small but steady. Tommy was crying and trying to pull away, but she was stronger. She poured the juice from a green bottle into his mouth. When he tried to spit it out, she slapped him and made him swallow. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts: first-degree murder, child abuse, assault. Nikki's face crumpled when the verdict was read. She was sentenced to life without parole. 1 down, but Claudia was still free. Detective Chin came to see Darren in Midland a week after Nikki's conviction. "We've presented everything we have to the DA. They're not confident they can charge Claudia with murder. The evidence is circumstantial. She knew. She helped plan it. I believe you. But proving it beyond reasonable doubt is different. Her lawyers will shred the phone records, the credit card receipts. They'll say she was a victim of her manipulative sister, that she had no idea Nikki would actually go through with it. So she gets away with it." Chin's expression was grim. "Unless we find something concrete, a confession, a witness, something irrefutable, yeah, she probably does." After Chin left, Darren sat on his apartment balcony, watching the West Texas sunset. His father joined him, carrying 2 beers. "You're not going to let this go," Lawrence said. "It wasn't a question. She killed my son. She's walking around free, shopping, having lunch with friends, sleeping with her boyfriend, while Tommy's in the ground. The law isn't always justice." "No, it isn't." Lawrence took a long drink. "So, what are you going to do?" Darren had been thinking about that question for months. He considered hiring someone to hurt her, make her suffer the way Tommy had suffered. He thought about confronting her publicly, destroying her reputation. But none of it felt right. None of it would truly make her pay. Then Franklin called with one final piece of information that changed everything. "I found Lori Jordan," Franklin said. "Nikki's friend from prison. She's willing to talk for a price." They met Lori in a diner outside of Dallas. She was in her 30s, hard-looking, with prison tattoos visible on her arms. She chain-smoked and watched them with calculating eyes. "Nikki talked about it inside," Lori said. "Talked about her rich sister, how they were going to solve their problem. She said Claudia had it all planned out. They'd poison the kid, make it look like an accident, collect the insurance, pay off Pope, and still have money left over." "You're willing to testify to this?" Darren asked. "For the right price. I've got nothing to lose, already did my time. But I need relocation money. Pope's people won't be happy if I talk." Franklin negotiated $20,000 for Lori's testimony and relocation expenses. Darren paid it without hesitation, pulling from Tommy's college fund money that would never be used as intended. With Lori's statement, The DA reopened the investigation into Claudia, but Galloway fought hard, trying to exclude Lori's testimony as hearsay, attacking her credibility as a convicted felon with financial motivation to lie. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for January. Darren prepared himself for a long battle, but Claudia made a mistake. Shane Buchanan, Claudia's boyfriend, was ambitious but not bright. He'd been funding Claudia's lifestyle, believing her story that she was a grieving mother trapped in a bad marriage. He had no idea about the loan shark, the insurance plot, or Nikki's conviction, until Franklin told him. Franklin arranged a meeting with Buchanan at his office, laying out everything: the debt, the poisoning, Claudia's involvement. Buchanan went pale. She told me her son died of a genetic disorder. She said Darren was abusive, that she was scared of him. She lied, Franklin said bluntly. She helped murder her son for insurance money. I need proof. Franklin showed him the documents, all of it. The loan papers, the phone records, Nikki's guilty verdict. Buchanan sat in stunned silence. What do you want from me? She trusts you, Darren said, speaking for the first time. He'd insisted on being there. Needed to look this man in the eye. She'll tell you things she won't tell anyone else. You want me to wear a wire? I want you to get the truth. For my son. Buchanan stared at the photos Franklin had brought, pictures of Tommy, smiling and alive, and then crime scene photos from the basement. His jaw clenched. She used me. Let me believe I was helping a victim when she's a murderer. Will you help us? Buchanan nodded slowly. Tell me what to do. The wire was Detective Chen's idea, approved by the DA. Buchanan wore it to a dinner with Claudia at an expensive restaurant in Houston's Museum District. The plan was simple. Get her talking about Nikki, about the trial, about Tommy. See if she'd slip, say something incriminating. Darren listened to the recording later, played back in Chen's office. He heard Claudia's laugh, that cold musical sound he'd once found charming. Nikki's lawyer is useless, she said on the recording. Life without parole. It's absurd. Do you think she deserves it? Buchanan asked carefully. Of course not. She was just trying to help us. The whole thing got out of hand. Help you how? There was a pause, glasses clinking. Then Claudia's voice, lower. The Tommy situation was supposed to be cleaner. Nikki got emotional, used too much. If she'd used the right amount, it would have looked like he got into the garage by himself, drank it by accident. No one would have questioned it. Darren's hands clenched. Chen glanced at him, but kept the recording playing. You knew she was going to poison him? Buchanan's voice was careful, neutral. We discussed options. Tommy was exhausting, expensive, and we needed the money. Stephen Pope was threatening to hurt my family. What choice did we have? You could have not killed your son. Claudia laughed. Don't be naive, Shane. Sometimes sacrifices are necessary for the greater good. Tommy would have been a drain on resources for years. This way, everyone wins except Darren, but he was always going to lose in the end. The recording continued, but Darren barely heard it. Chen stopped the tape. That's enough for murder charges, Chen said. Premeditation, conspiracy, depraved indifference to human life. When do you arrest her? Tonight. She's meeting Buchanan again at his place. We'll be waiting. Darren watched the news that night with Sophia curled against him. The arrest footage showed Claudia being led out of Buchanan's high-rise in handcuffs, her face a mask of shock and rage. She screamed at the cameras, claiming she was set up, that the recording was fabricated. Sophia didn't say anything, just held her father's hand tighter. Claudia's trial began in March. Unlike Nikki's, this one was a media circus. The story had everything: a beautiful socialite, a murdered child, insurance fraud, loan sharks. Court TV covered it gavel to gavel. Darren attended every day, sitting in the front row where Claudia could see him. He wanted her to look at him, to see what she'd destroyed. Most days she avoided his eyes, but sometimes she'd glance over, and he'd see not remorse but resentment, as if he were the one who'd wronged her. The prosecution played the recording. The courtroom was silent as Claudia's voice filled the space, describing her son's murder with clinical detachment. Several jurors looked sick. Galloway did his best, arguing the recording was obtained under duress, that Claudia had been manipulated by Buchanan. But the evidence was overwhelming. The jury had Nikki's conviction, Lori Jordan's testimony, the financial records, and most damning of all, Claudia's own words. The verdict came back in 4 hours. Guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. Sentencing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. The judge, a stern woman named Marjorie Foster, looked at Claudia with undisguised contempt. "You plotted to murder your own child for money." "Judge," Foster said, "you showed no remorse, no hesitation. You treated his life as an inconvenience to be eliminated. I'm sentencing you to life in prison without the possibility of parole. May God have mercy on your soul, because this court has none." Claudia's facade finally cracked. She screamed, crying that it was unfair, that she'd been entrapped. The bailiffs had to drag her from the courtroom. Outside, reporters swarmed Darren. He gave one statement. "My son, Tommy, was 6 years old. He loved dinosaurs, building blocks, and helping me fix things in the garage. He deserved a full life, not to be murdered by people who were supposed to love him. Justice has been served, but it doesn't bring him back. It never will." 2 years passed. Darren and Sophia built a new life in Midland. He took a job as a logistics manager for a regional trucking company, work that let him be home every night. Sophia slowly emerged from her shell, made friends, joined the school art club. They went to therapy together, learning to carry the grief without letting it consume them. On what would have been Tommy's 9th birthday, they visited his grave. Sophia had made a painting of them all together, her, Tommy, and Darren, standing in front of a house that didn't exist anymore. "I miss him," she said quietly. "Me too, sweetheart. Every day. Do you think Mom regrets it?" Darren considered the question carefully. He'd seen Claudia once since the sentencing, when he'd driven to her prison to retrieve some of Tommy's belongings she'd kept in storage. She'd looked older, harder, but not remorseful. "I think she regrets getting caught," he said honestly. "I don't think she regrets what she did. Some people can't feel that kind of remorse. I'm glad she's in prison." "Me too." They sat by the headstone for a while, the Texas sun warm on their shoulders. Eventually, Sophia stood. "I'm ready to go, Daddy." In the truck, she turned to him. "Are you ever going to date anyone?" "Grandma says you should." Darren smiled slightly. "Maybe someday. For now, I'm good with just you and me." "Good, because I'm not ready to share you." "Deal." That night, after Sophia went to bed, Darren sat on the porch with his father. Lawrence had aged in the past 2 years, his hair gone completely gray, but his eyes were still sharp. "You did good, son," Lawrence said. "Saw it through, got justice. Didn't feel like enough. It never does. But you protected Sophia, made sure those women couldn't hurt anyone else. That counts." Darren thought about Tommy's coffee mug, still on his desk at work. "World's best dad," painted in a 6-year-old's uneven letters. He'd failed Tommy in the end, hadn't protected him, hadn't seen the danger until too late. "I should have known," he said. "Should have trusted my instincts." You can't change the past. You can only move forward. Later, alone in his apartment, Darren pulled out his phone and looked at photos of Tommy. The boy's smile, bright and uncomplicated. The last picture was from Father's Day morning. Tommy holding his handmade card, proud and excited. Darren had that photo printed and framed. It sat on Sophia's nightstand now, so she could say goodnight to her brother. Justice had been served. Nikki and Claudia would spend the rest of their lives in prison. Stephen Pope had been arrested, too. His loan sharking operation shut down. Everyone who'd played a part in Tommy's death had paid a price. But Tommy was still gone. Darren knew he'd carry that loss forever. Some wounds never heal. They just become part of you, shape you into something different than you were before. He was harder now, less trusting, more protective of Sophia. But he was also more present, more grateful for the time he had with his daughter. They'd survived, they'd gotten justice. And somehow, despite everything, they'd found a way to keep living. That would have to be enough. 3 months later, Detective Chen called with unexpected news. "I thought you'd want to know Claudia's appealing her conviction. Galloway's claiming the recording was inadmissible." Darren's chest tightened. "Can she win?" "Unlikely. The evidence beyond the recording is solid, but appeals can take years. Just wanted to prepare you." After hanging up, Darren sat with the news. Part of him had hoped it was over, that he could finally move on completely. But he realized now that some battles don't end cleanly. There would always be something: appeals, parole hearings decades from now, reminders of what he'd lost. He could live with that. As long as Sophia was safe, as long as they had each other, he could face whatever came next. That evening, Sophia came home from school excited. "Daddy, I got the lead in the school play. It's about a girl who goes on adventures with her father." "That's wonderful, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you." She hugged him tight. "Will you come to all the rehearsals?" "Every single one." As she chattered about the play, Darren felt something shift inside him. Tommy's death would always be a hole in his heart, a wound that ached on Father's Day and birthdays and random Tuesday afternoons. Claudia and Nikki would always be the monsters who'd taken his son from him, but they hadn't taken everything. Sophia was here, thriving, finding joy again. And Darren was here, keeping the promise he'd made to himself in Tommy's hospital room to protect his daughter, to make sure the people who'd hurt his family paid the price, to build a life worth living despite the grief. He'd won, not the way he'd wanted, not with Tommy alive and safe. But he'd exposed the truth, gotten justice, kept Sophia from becoming another victim. In a world where bad people often escaped consequences, that meant something. It had to mean something. The sun was setting over Midland, painting the sky orange and purple. Through the window, Darren could see the wide Texas landscape, endless and unforgiving and beautiful. Tomorrow he'd wake up, make Sophia breakfast, drive her to school, go to work, come home, help with homework, normal life, continuing despite everything. And every day, he'd remember Tommy, not just the way he died, but the way he lived, bright, curious, loving. That was the real victory, Darren realized. Not letting the monsters define his son's story. Tommy had been more than a victim. He'd been a boy who loved dinosaurs and building blocks, who made crooked coffee mugs and asked 1,000 questions. That boy would never be forgotten. Darren would make sure of it. He pulled Sophia close as they watched the sunset together, and for the first time in 2 years, felt something like peace. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.